Here at allpointstv.com. Glad to see you out there. And I want to say very early in our program today, Merry Christmas. And I wish you a wonderful new year. And I know you're going to have a great year because we are starting something new and we're getting rid of something old. Down with the old and up with the new. And the old is there's an administration going out and we have another administration coming in. And there's tremendous joy to the world, joy to the United States. There's a lot of joy going on right now. And I know people that I come in contact with and have been talking to, they are very elated about the possibilities that are now open to the country based upon the next administration. There's some great hope that Donald Trump will be able to do some things and turn some things around. I do want you to read my article on Facebook today, and I've been doing some things that that are kind of intuitive. I'm not always happy about the going with the flow. I want to try to be cooperative with other commentaries that are out there, and we have a commentary here. But sometimes just can't go along with some of the things that are being said. But I do commend all of the person out here that are trying to make a difference, and there are some people out here trying to steer the country in a direction in which we can make some progress. But I have to tell you something. There are a lot of obstacle courses this country has to go through because we're walking through a minefield right now. There's so many things that I'm talking about in terms of the future. There's so many things that's in front of us that are going to be a problem in terms of walking through these minefields that have been created by some of the past decision making that's been made. And we're going to have to just be very careful in how we walk through and navigate through this this minefield. This is a minefield that we've got to go through because we've had some bad, should I say bad decision making, some cowardly decision making has been made where people do not understand you cannot postpone things into the future forever because the future will get here. And if you keep postponing and putting more things off into the future, at some point when you get to that future, it'd be so overwhelming the number of things you pile up to deal with later on that the present circumstance cannot really overcome all the things that have been tumbled into the future. And I think it's where we are right now. That's why a lot of persons are saying, and I'm saying it now in some of the writings that I'm doing on Facebook, that I think that we've come very close. And I hate to say we've come to the place of no return, but we've come very close to it. We're very close to a point of no return. And I have to tell you, I was listening to uh, I watched a couple of programs. I love these programs that where someone will say something about the Constitution. We can't talk about that enough because we are so far away from it. Any discussions about it will help us to at least think about what the document requires of us and what the framers had in mind when they wrote it. And I'm not always sure that we have a lot of people understand what the intentionalities were in writing the document because they keep saying constitutional scholars, and I try to listen to what they're saying now, and I just don't hear a lot of that in what's being said. I don't even hear it in what the Supreme Court is saying and their rulings. There's too many opinions that the court is making, and you really don't need a lot of opinionated kind of conclusions made by the Supreme Court. Just understand what the document requires, and the court having to explain first make a ruling and then explain the ruling and give his opinion about what it said and all of that. I think a lot of that is unnecessary if you understand what the document requires. And I'm going to say a few things here today. I'm going to try to clear some things up here, um, because I'm telling you that a lot of what's being said here is very problematical if you understand the document. We've been talking the last couple of weeks about Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. And I'm going to make that the basis of our conversation, the appointment clause of the Constitution. And then I wanted to bring in something else that just came up last week with person are now talking about um, birthright citizenship. And I know what the claim is that if you fly over the country and the child is born, let's say they had a case in Canada where the plane was in the air and uh, the, the person on the plane was pregnant and gave birth. They haven't even landed the plane yet on the land space in Canada, but they're flying over the land space, and because of that, the idea of the child then is a Canadian citizen. And there are a few countries that where that is the contention, and that's contention in the United States. But and they asked that question of Donald Trump when this lady on Meet the Press was interviewing him or interrogating. It looked like more of an interrogation than it was an interview. Very hostile. This woman's very. There's some people just really don't like Donald Trump, and that really is a way of substituting what really the problem is. They don't like the country, and I'm not at all saying here to dislike Trump is equivalent to disliking the country, but a lot of that animus against Trump, because it was not. We didn't notice an animus against Trump before he came down to the escalator, and not even at that point they were laughing at him when he came down the escalator and announced to run for president. They stopped laughing when he began to win some of those primaries, and they saw that he really was a threat to go in there as an outsider and take over the some of the space that was occupied by these traditional politicians who were not challenged. They just simply run, and then because they have come from this place, and then they're not running in that place, and they have this status, and now they're running for another higher level of witnessing in another branch of the government. They all seem like they're career politicians. They start off somewhere and they keep going up one position to another. And Donald Trump was doing it a different way and was a laughing stock until this man showed that he was not going anywhere, and he was willing to do the work, put the hours in to become a force out there. When they began to see this guy was coming from a different place, but this was no laughing matter about him coming in from the outside with no political experience and coming in at the very top of the food chain at the highest political office we have in the country and running for the highest office that we have in the country. That was unparalleled with no military experience and with no political experience. So since that never happened before, we hadn't had a candidate like Donald Trump before either. Donald Trump was being laughed at. They stopped laughing as he began to have one politician after another falling by the wayside because he was picking them off one at a time. And when it got down to a certain number, they saw that they're falling by the wayside, but this guy's still going strong and picking up momentum. And they began to realize that maybe this is not a laughing stock. And he was holding his own. And one thing that you notice about his candidacy at the very beginning is that unlike most politicians, when they catch you one of those gotcha moments, uh, most of them don't want to come out and create any kind of controversy. And what Donald Trump was doing was something that persons were looking at as something different. Whenever they thought they had him in a gotcha moment, he embraced it, got you, and then dismissed it as something that was just like it was feckless, and just simply brushed it off and kept going. Case in point was that time when Megan Kelly, who now is, by the way, and she's that's another thing. She's almost like a witness to Donald Trump's campaign. She was against Donald Trump at the very beginning.
She's very hostile to him, and then he
Very hostile.
turned it
John,
around. I mean,
yeah. What do you attribute that to, John?
well, I think basically she had to look at what he's done, and he stood his ground. He did what he said who he meant. He said what he meant what he said. He carried out, or the best as he could, try to get everything done that he said he was going to do. I don't know, but I mean, I just saw transformative. I mean, he took J.D. Vance, his vice president now. He was a never Trumper before. I
Yeah,
mean, it's or close to it or whatever. I can't remember. I mean, I can't full details, but he basically he got him on board. I don't. I mean, basically, he convinced people of his genuineness, and he wasn't faking it.
yeah,
He
that's
done. I
true.
think he cares. Let's face it. He spent millions, and millions of his own dollars. Everybody else in D.C. is walking away making money on this. He's losing money. That's got to go against the very grain of Donald Trump.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's like no, I mean, but I just think that that's what it was. He knows how to get to people. He knows how to. He's a deal maker,
yeah.
and you can't
You think
overlook
you
that.
think that's what swayed Megan Kelly, because she's a strong critic of Donald Trump, and
Yeah,
now she's in his corner almost 100%.
yeah, it's like she's almost like an apologist for him. I mean, she's a
Yeah,
defender of him. I mean, yeah, I just think that that's. I'm just shaking my head because I mean, he's this guy's. I do. You look at what he's suffered through, all he's sacrificed, his time. Let's face it, his family's never gonna be the same after this. I mean, I bet you there's splits and rifts and stuff like that going on. He's done it. I mean, nobody paid the price. They always talk about sacrifice. We all know that basically means, well, I'm going to pretend like I'm on the public eye and I'm going to give up my family and stuff like that. But they're reaping millions and millions of dollars. He's just the opposite. I
yeah,
mean, he's genuine about caring for this country, and he listens to the people rather than here's our agenda. He's saying, what do you think we got to do? That's what
yeah.
he's doing.
I think you're onto something here. I was trying to put my finger on just as I saw the transition that was being made. A lot of those critics, the never Trumpers, they're coming in one by one, and pretty much lining up behind his candidacy right now. And I just think that I kept trying to figure out why was there such a change over by so many people who, first of all, just simply dismissed him, and then after they stopped laughing and they showed he was a serious candidate, and just the fact that many persons that were never Trumpers are now solidly behind him.
Like, look at Richard Whitmer, our governor, who I can't stand. She actually said she knows that Trump genuinely cares about Michigan. And listen to this. This is John Fetterman, from Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
He said, I'm not rooting against Trump. If you're rooting against the president, you're rooting against the nation. This is John Fetterman, a
yeah.
Democrat, saying
Now
that.
he has been very. Now John Fetterman has been very impressive. I think that he is really a person that believes in bipartisan politics, because early on, as Trump was running for the post this year, uh, Fetterman was being very even in his remarks, and I thought he was kind of like a little on the flake side at first, and he doesn't, the man the man is dressing in a hoodie, and I just didn't think he was I'd say presidential. I didn't think he was senatorial enough. I think you have to kind of dress the. I'm the person that wore a shirt and tie every day and a suit coat every day. That I was in the classroom. I never wore tennis shoes. I wore business attire. And when I became the principal, I thought that everybody should be dressed up in the uh, in the classroom, but that you couldn't enforce that because of the different things they have backing up the right to your own attire and so on. But I would have, if had it been up to me, I would have mandated that everybody that is in front of children, that you in fact dress the part, even if you're not making that much money. You first, you're a teacher, and teachers don't make that much money if you got 30 years and they're making that much money. But I just think you stand in front of children, you got to be out there competing dress wise with all of the persons that are in the street. They're passing through the streets, and guys got gold chains on, and they're doing pretty well. Look like they're well off, and you in there wearing tennis shoes. That I don't know if they want to listen to you or not, because it's like you have anything out there. So I like that. I was trying to stress a dress code. I couldn't get it through because I didn't have the power to override contractual language. But I think so. I was trying to figure out how does some person switch over from their dismissing Donald Trump, and then all of a sudden it's like no, 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 yay, and they start seeing a lot of persons celebrating this man's candidacy, and I think that just the fact that he would not quit, and even after he got shot, and I know Chris Ray was trying to say there was he wasn't shot, it was a ricochet, and they were shooting at him whether it ricocheted or not. They were shooting at him trying to kill the man, and they're trying to downplay that. But uh, I think that when he did that fight, and just would not stop. And then the other thing was this would probably be the first president in our lifetime who actually lost. These politicians are losing their money now running for these high offices. The presidential office pays $400,000 right now, and they're now fighting over that the salary of John was saying before we got on the air today that these senators are trying to. I know Durbin was talking about they want this 8% or so much increase in their pay. I don't know why they want to get more pay. They don't deserve the pay they're getting, but that's the fight they got going on right now. You don't hear Donald Trump talking about that. Donald Trump is talking about continuing what he did when he's the 45th president of the United States, and that was demand for 4 years. You have to get some pay, which is the minimum. You have to get at least $1. In other words, you can't make the president a slave by not getting any pay. So he's required to take $1 so that there's some payment involved. Otherwise, it serfdom. It serfdom anyway, based upon the large responsibility the president has. But $400,000, okay, that's what the salary is now, plus the money you get because of the amount of expense you have in the office, traveling expenses and the meals away from the White House and things of that sort. And there's certain things you have to do as the president. So there's another $50,000 or so that's in the package. But the salary itself is $400,000. Donald Trump refused all of that. Did not receive any pay for the 4 years he was president from 2017 to 2021, and that's what he's starting off this time. He's already opted out of getting paid during the being the 47th president of the United States.
According to Reuters, though, the thing that they're trying to pass their pay increase during that huge bill that they basically streamlined that they passed for the stopgap measure to keep the government running. And initially, it was reported that they were trying to go 40% increase, but it was actually 3%. It was going to take their salaries up from $174,000 to $180,000. But if you look at the fact that they're what, like I said, everything's we were talking about everything they get, it's already paid for. They got expense accounts to take care of everything. They have operating budgets for their offices and both home and also in DC, and all their salaries and stuff of all their offices. They don't pay that out of their pocket. They pay that comes out of the general accounting through the general accounting office, or U.S. taxpayers' money. So I mean, even then, I mean, $176,000. I mean, I think that's an amazing amount of money. I mean,
but what they're doing, and John, they're not living on their salaries anyway.
No, let's face it. Then Crenshaw, the guy, the pirate, looking guy, he was angry because they didn't want to give the increase and stuff. And then he said we were supposed to get it a long time ago. And he said another thing is like, then he's also angry because they want to put provision for stopping congressmen and senators from be able to buy stocks. Well, I think they should. They're the ones passing the legislation, so now they can hurry up, get there on this thing, and hey, we just passed this, so we're going to benefit off of it. I mean, that's ridiculous. Nobody should have a right to regulate your salaries at that degree. They can't be crying that they're poor. Every one of them is greatly increased. That when they leave office, they could walk out with a hell of a lot more than they started with.
Right. I'm watching. I tell you who I'm watching right now. I'm watching Adam Schiff over there that took over the seat that was vacated by uh, Dianne Feinstein, who wouldn't leave her position. She died in the seat. Even her staff was saying that they were not going. They were that they were not going to let her run. They were going to prevent her running for another term. She had survived that last term she was elected to, senator from California. She was just simply propped up in a chair. Didn't know what she was. She was as bad as Biden. Now, Adam Schiff is going to be when they swear in the next Congress on January the 3rd. Adam Schiff would be in Feinstein's seat, in her seat, and her income, Dianne Feinstein's income at the time of her death was $110 million. I don't care how long you're in the Congress, you're not accumulating no $110 million off no $174,000 salary, and got to have two abodes that you're taking care of, both in your district and got to have residence in the capital, and that is coming out of a salary. You're not billing them no $10 million, no $110 million as Feinstein did, and you're not going to do the 135 million. And this statistic is old. You're not going to do the $135 million of Pelosi.
Can you imagine all your friends, all your family members, ever since you were born, all the way since now, added up all their salaries and all their earthly goods, and add that and put a dollar number on it, amount on it? Nowhere near what these people are making off of our backs. Yet you're trying to say they're so noble because they're civil servants. Where the hell's the nobility? They're reaping way more than they deliver for us. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. I like to see them. I like to see if anybody should be paid these large salaries. I want to see our military paid these large salaries, and then put these politicians in these barracks. They got the military in these barracks, and they're making, you never get rich. You dig in a ditch. You earn the army now. That's kind of money that's being made by those who put their life on the line and defending the country. And then when they come back to the beg for veterans benefits, and it's an outrage. But they're not hurting for any entitlements, and because they're not, because they have their thumb on the scale, they don't have to pay. They don't have to tell you that to do business in Washington, you got to have a fist full of dollars. That's just the way it operates. And you can just recall, I hope you can recall that when AOC, they got her these initials when they getting ready to build you up, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when she first was elected from a bartending position, rescued by winning the 14th district, I think it was in New York, she couldn't afford her residence in Washington because what she had been making as a bartender was such that she had to get a couple of checks in before she could get an abode in the nation's capital. Now that has been two? She's there going on 3 terms now. Okay, well her income now in that amount of time that she's been in Washington, she's now uh, at an asset rate of $29 million. Is one report that I read in terms of where her assets are right now. So from not being able to afford housing in 2 different places, now she is How did she get $174,000 and now she's got $29 million in the bank? Her assets have gone up by what? I mean, how many hundreds percent increase would that be? And that's really the entitlements of being in these political offices. The only person that I know of that lost money by running for office and holding office was Donald Trump. I don't know of anybody else that didn't gain. Look at Obama with residents all over the place. Didn't leave Washington. Time for him to get out of there. And then he's over there got a abode in Hawaii, and he's over there on Martha's Vineyard. That's a $12 million property he has there. And where did that money come from? I mean, this is typically these politicians. 50% of the ones in the Congress, 50% are millionaires.
Well, Reuters, I just checked this up. They said that she doesn't have $29 million.
How much does she?
They claim anywhere between $3,000 and $45,000 in assets, including her 401k pension plan, and she and owed at least $15,000 in student loans. Well, she's been there for so long. I think she should have already gotten that paid off.
I read one report. We'll see what her income tax says, but I read one report, and I don't have any reason to doubt it, because they all have to run there with a fistful of dollars in order to be able to do business in Washington. And they said in this one report, they said that she is now worth $29 million. And these loud voices now, they're out there standing out loudly from the crowd, because whoever's making the noise, that's where the money travels to, because that's where the influence is. I like to see what Schumer's what is his what are his assets. You can believe this, that he didn't go in there. He didn't have the same assets he went in there with when he first ran. He's a career politician now. You can believe this. His bank account is up there, and I have no reason to doubt Alexandria Cortez, that report that she's now. And I read that report, and I did the double take, because I know that she didn't go there with anything. But I read where she has now a bank account, or whatever you want to call it. Her assets now have gone up $29 million. They can deny Feinstein. Feinstein died at $110 million. Pelosi at a minimum, and these statistics are 4 or 5 years old now.
Okay, well, for Schumer, we got an estimate of $837,000.
Yeah, right.
And $2,405.
Is that right?
Yeah, 200.
What do they have for Pelosi? I'd be interested.
Pelosi, yeah, she's outstanding. I mean, I know Pelosi's got 100. I think it was 125 million or something like that. Yeah, I'll go look it up.
Yeah, look that up, John. The statistics I read about Pelosi is $135 million.
Yeah, hold on here. It's like
what does it say there?
Okay.
And what is that statistic that you're reading from anyway? Because that
one that was from Open Secrets, or Open. It's like Nancy Pelosi's net worth is allegedly $273.36 million.
Yeah, that now we're talking the ballpark, John. When they tell me that Schumer's been there for a number of years, and his money is in the high hundreds of thousands or low millions of dollars, I don't believe that, because I know how Washington operates.
Besides what I've heard about Pelosi, she's related to Newsom, to the governor of California. Her family on the East Coast is what I call mobsters, mafiosa. So I mean, this is not just speculation. I mean, what I've seen is pretty verified.
John, I know how they operate in Washington. That's a book out by Thomas DeLorenzo called Organized Crime. The subtitle, Unraveling the Truth About Government. And also with the mafioso, there's a book out called The Mafioso Kingfish. And thanks, John. I was in here suffering. And the book, The Mafioso Kingfish, is talking about how the mafia, the organized crime. We always talk about the mafia as organized crime, and we always talk about that as being away from government. We never think about government being organized crime. And those that are in organized crime. There's a guy out there we should pay more attention to, and I think this guy telling us the truth. A guy named well, he changed his name. He now goes. He's in one of the penal institutions right now. A guy named James Files. They should listen to James Files more because James Files is the one that was in that. It was in that grassy knoll uh, when Kennedy was killed. He's that shooter, and they're trying. Of course, he can come out and say a lot of things about that now because they're not going to admit that they've been lying to the American people for going on 60. Let's see, 1963 to 2024, 61 years. They're not going to admit that they've been lying for 61 years to the American people, but that's what it amounts to because Oswald didn't kill anybody on the 22nd of November, nor did he kill Officer Tippit. All of that is part of the narration of the having passes set up to take the responsibility for a well coordinated and very planned assassination. I will tell you this also. They had planned. The CIA had planned to kill Donald Trump. I'm not playing no games here, folks. These people are not who you think they are. But I think they ought to pay attention to James Files. James Files, they need to listen to what James Files is saying here. And everything he said in his talking about the setup in Dallas, everything they checked out checks out. Because the hit on Kennedy was a hit between the JV mafia, that'll be the ones in what they call organized crime. That'll be John Rosselli and Nicoletti, Trafficante, and Sam Giancana. Those were the JV mafias, the mafia members. The gangsters that the real ones that are the gangsters at the top of the food chain are those persons inside of our government, the CIA, the FBI, and so on and so forth. You need to go and pay attention here to what's going on in this country because the mafia is in Washington. If you don't think these are mafia members, if you don't think that's a mafia, go and listen to what these persons are saying on these networks right now. There was one I was listening to this morning, and I don't want to get too far off my subject. But I do want to say some things about the Constitution because we got to get back to this and understand this document here. And I do want to say a couple of things here about it so I can clean up a couple of things that they're now saying about it that I know we got to get past this nonsense because none of that stuff they're talking about is true. But we got to understand here that we got as of 1947 with the setup of the CIA under Truman, we got to understand how that changed the way that this government does business in this country because that's when we had that's the beginning of the deep state with Allen Dulles of the CIA. Those Dulles brothers were running things as a second alternative government structure. They had John Foster Dulles in the Eisenhower administration, and there was an orchestration he was doing from that side of the fence. And then they had after during Truman's administration before Eisenhower took over in '52, they had Allen Dulles was the first director of the CIA. And if they think that after Kennedy fired Allen Dulles, that Allen Dulles just went home and packed up and left and simply forgot all about being angered by being thrown and casted to the wind like that, guess what? after Kennedy was assassinated, they appointed Alan Dulles as one of the 7 members of the commission that investigated Kennedy's death. The man that Kennedy fired is now investigating the death of the president. But we were starry-eyed at that time, so we didn't raise any eyebrows at that point. But I've looked at this case over the course of 40 years, and I will tell you this. If the American people knew what really happened there, they would see how what they said happened in Dealey Plaza is not what happened in Dealey Plaza. And I'm waiting to see what Trump's going to do here, because there are some things right now that's happening in that administration that Trump is assembling that's problematical for these persons that's still in that shadow government. There's Robert F. Kennedy being placed there as the food administrator, and there's a lot of money in in that, because the food is how people are getting. If the food had any nutrition in it, you would be feeding into the pharmaceutical industry, and that the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry, that's a chain. That's a circular chain it goes from one around to the other, because one hand feeds the other. And they've got Robert F. Kennedy in there in a strategic position, and Trump has said, "Don't do that which you do in that particular arena, but do not come over here messing with the drill, baby, drill. But as long as you stay in that lane, that's fine. Well, maybe not so much, but you now got Robert F. Kennedy Jr. His father was killed. His uncle was killed, and that's in that administration. And Donald Trump was telling him to open up the Kennedy files. I'll tell you this: there's some people looking at that, and they understand that this administration is if you watch who's being appointed here, this administration is mobilizing by the appointees. They are mobilizing for a fight against the deep state, and there are people watching who they're putting on that team, and they know exactly what that means. Even if the American people don't know, they know what that means. It means that they're getting ready to confront these people, and they're going to fight. They're not walking away from power and privilege and money, which is what this really is about. It boils down to trillions of dollars that are being vacated out of the Treasury Department and going into these different places where there's no accountability. Even when they give this foreign aid and that and what that is about, a lot of money is being wasted by these tricks that they have and so on and so forth. They had a trick last week. That 1,500-page behemoth they had as a bill they were going to pass, which they cut it down from 1,500 pages to 150 pages, and it went from here to there. And people thought, well, if they had this number of pages and then went down to this number of pages, they took out some of the pork. No, they didn't take out any of the pork. What they did is take down the number of pages, then added the pork on the other side of it to lesser number of pages. There's $110 billion of additional fat that was added to it after they cut the pages down. They cut the pages down and increased the amount of the pork in the bill. That's how they operate in Washington. These are organized gangsters. I don't have any respect. You can bring on. I watched Mark Levine's program, and you can bring on these lightweights like Ted Cruz and some of the others. And I was on one of the call-in shows. They called me up and asked me to be one of the persons on the call-in, and of course. I knew they and they come. Yeah, the way they do it, they have you online, but your line is dead until they come and you can't say anything now but you're listening, and then they'll come in behind while you're holding the line. They come and ask you what your question is going to be, and if your question doesn't pass the smell test, they don't call you back and ask you to get online where you can actually talk to the rest of the listeners. And I'm sitting there for the hour. I think that was an hour and a half. I held the phone for the hour and a half. I just want to see, are you gonna call me back? Are you gonna call me back and ask me to ask that question on there? I don't think so. And sure enough, they were saying at the end as they wrapped it up, uh, um, we'll have time for one more question. I know that was not my question going to be the last question, but that's how they do it. They so I listened to, so Ted Cruz was a guest last night. I tolerated him on the Sunday night program. I don't have any. This man didn't. He's not any more impressive than anybody else in there. They all on the same. They all on the same plane. That's why I don't single out the House Speaker Mike Thomas. I don't. I don't single him out because he's just one of the pipsqueaks, one of the rascals among the rest of the rascals and rascalettes inside of the halls of power. Ain't none of them serious. You want the truth, right? You think they were serious last week when they were talking about passing that bill and had that and showed that stack of papers on that one side? And you think they read that bill and so on and so forth? They felt just like John Conyers felt, or like Nancy Pelosi felt about these bills. You have to read it. You have to pass it before you read it. They don't even read it after they pass it. They don't write it, and they don't read it. And John Conyers was saying that if they read the bills that were passed, they couldn't do anything else. Well, you shouldn't pass a thing you're not reading. And they slip in there these little tangential issues and all that, sneak that in there, and before you know it, we got stuff in there. You can call it pork if you want to. That's intended. Let me tell you what our deficit is. Now they might say, look what they're doing with these numbers that John is reading, that they're worth this how much, this are assets and so on and so forth, and they'll have these sanitized numbers and things like that. The 36 trillion dollars is a sanitized number. Do you know what the national debt is in this country right now? And I'm gonna be very conservative here because this will be as of 19. This is as of 2019. $242 trillion. And I'm including here all of the unfunded liabilities in that number. The national debt in this country right now, they admit the $36 trillion. That's bad enough. The national debt of this country right now. Go and read it for yourself. Get off the things that are sanitized and put into the public square because they don't want because don't forget the engines, the news engines, information engines are controlled by the FCC and other licensing boards. So many licensing boards out there that you don't even hear about. And so these sanitized numbers that people speak from, I'm not speaking from those numbers. I have my own numbers from other sources that I'm talking about professors and other persons that have gone and looked at these budgets, and some of it, you can go and look at the numbers. I can use some places to go and look for the real numbers. The debt of this country, the unfunded liabilities of this country, and add that into the actual debt. We got right now a national debt of $242 trillion. Even if they admit to 37 to $38 trillion, that's bad enough because $37 trillion means $37,000 billion. It's bigger than that. And this debt this debt can never be paid off, and it has developed a life of his own, and we're going to eventually be drowned in that debt. We've already reached a point of no return. I wrote about that today on my post. And I'm challenging everybody out there that's saying otherwise. They're not, see, they're not in this, they think they're in this ballpark. They're not in this ballpark. These scholars think that they are in the ballpark on the Constitution. I listen to what they say. They're not in that, they're not in this ballpark. I'm challenging all of them. I consider all of them, and I'm gonna say this on the air. I consider all of them, um, Turley, Dershowitz. I don't even consider Lawrence Tribe to be in that league. But I consider them to be television scholars. They're not constitutional scholars. They're television scholars. They're more television. And I used to think that Harvard was a top-notch school. It might have been at I'm getting to even challenge that, quite frankly, as I go back to some of the history of that university. That's just where the government gets its judges from, and the journalists come out of Columbia University. That's where the people in the news industry come from. They got different places they go to because they know what these quote unquote think tanks, and I don't even know if they're think tanks, but they pick from those places. So therefore, these are the universities credited as being the top ones. That's where the government goes to fill its spaces and so on and so forth. I mean, Felix Frankfurter, what did he know? Uh, Harvard University and so on, and you get the or Clarence Thomas from Cornell. I think he came out of Cornell. They look at see these are the places they pull from, and they're considered to be originalists and things of that sort. Some of them are just out there, you know, uh, winging it. They're winging it with these opinions. And when they say originalists to what? Because because when I get through with this series we're doing right now on Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, I'm going to be doing something on the people in that room in 1787 because I had to understand some things here because I read all of the Federalist Papers more than once. And I was bothered by some of the things that were being written by Alexander Hamilton. I don't think he was uh, trying to mislead anybody with his writing, but I was bothered by the fact that some of the things he wrote about in the Federalist paper related, by the way, to Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, and some of it had to think about how could he be writing that as a defense of what that language says in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. It wasn't he was doing a misdirection in his writing, but he wasn't. But I had to understand, and I had to go back through the notes of Yates from New York, and going back through the notes of the great lawgiver James Madison, to go back through those notes again, because it'd been 90 to 2024. That's 30. Is that 30? 34 years, isn't it? 30, that's 34 years ago. I had to go back through some of those things that I had, in some of my papers, and had to go back through some of those papers to look and just to find out where the notes were that I took when I was doing my grad work. And I will tell you this: I went back through some of the since Hamilton wrote 51 of the Federalist Papers. I wanted to go and look at what Hamilton wrote about Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, and also what Madison wrote about it. Because I could not understand how they got, and I'm saying this, how they got it wrong. And I had to figure out how could they be in that room because they all in that it is this, all this is going on in that room where they had also done the Declaration of they had paid witness to Jefferson's writing the Declaration of Independence in that room, and so they're in that room. And how are they writing what they wrote? For example, what Hamilton wrote in Federalist Paper 45, and also in Federalist Paper 74. I think Federalist Paper 75 was written by James Madison, but I'm reading those papers over again, and I don't, I don't, I don't think Hamilton and got that right. I don't think that their reading of Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, their reading of it is correct. Not if that language is correct in the Constitution. You scholars may think you're on this level. We'll talk about that when I get to Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, as I finalize that discussion about that. Because we got to understand that we don't need a whole lot of opinions made by these courts. The reason why you have the court giving its opinion is because they're making rulings away from what the document calls for. Even when you look at the most famous of the cases that I think everybody knows about this case, they don't know anything else about the Supreme Court. They know that between 1896 and 1954, 58 years later, after they made the original ruling of separate but equal, 58 years later, they changed their mind with the same language in the document and said that separate but equal is inherently unconstitutional because what makes it unconstitutional is that but in there. Separate but equal. There's no but in the claim of the 14th Amendment. Separate but equal. And they finally said 58 years later, after they made in Plessy versus Ferguson, they made the claim that separate but equal, separate is inherently unequal because it cannot be equal in every facet of the separation because does it have the same members on the, you can get very technical about that. You see, now we got to do interpretation because they're falling away from what the document requires. So now we got to go in and the government and the Supreme Court changes its mind with no change in the language. Somebody should read this book called what's that book called that where I got to think of the name of this book because that's a reading there. Simple Justice, name of the book, where they were discussing before they had the Brown ruling, because that Brown case started in 51, and then by the time they got to the Supreme Court and at the Benson had died, I think in 53. He was the Supreme Court justice at that time, and he died in 53. And then Earl Warren, the former governor of California, became the appointee of Johnson and became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which prompted the person from Harvard, Felix Frankfurter, saying that until this Vincent died, Felix Frankfurter said he didn't believe in God until Vincent died because these were adversaries on the court. But once Vincent died, it made a pathway for the unanimity of the court ruling. They had decided that out in the parking lot. They were out there discussing that maybe on the golf course somewhere because they understood this about striking down Plessy versus Ferguson. If you got a split court, 5-4, make a 5-4 ruling where 5 are saying this and 4 saying the other, the court is split. And what the South is going to do is you have a bust between the different numbers and refuse to comply because they had the South was standing resolutely against the federal government coming in telling the states how to run their own educational system. You know, this before we even had the federal government talking about setting up a Department of Education, which that's also illegal and unconstitutional. But that's before even that we went down that line. And I'm going to see if they're going to cut that out. You know, as the um, the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, that Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are going to have go through here with I don't know if you can say a fine tooth comb. Quite frankly, it's going to be impossible to go through there with a fine tooth comb because if you want to really understand it, if you really want to understand what needs to go on here, you need to go back and cut out 11 of those 15 departments you have right now. You don't need no 15 departments in the federal government. Each one of them is a mammoth behemoth created. And so we started out this country, certainly with a smaller population and all the rest of that, with 4 departments. We got 15. We got 15 departments right now, and when you add the vice president, that's 16 cabinet members. We have 15 department heads and the vice president of the United States, and so on and so forth. So we've gotten way off from where we should have been. What they should have done, quite frankly, if you're going to add any additional person, add them to the 4 departments you started out with, but don't add in the new departments. You don't need new departments. You just need to have someone that's going to. The government has basically 3 functions, and that is lawmaking, so that you can make sure that we have a standard of behavior for the citizens and the institutions of the country. You have to have law enforcement, so the police apparatus and things of that sort. And you must have an arbiter that can normalize the interaction of government with its own self. The government is talking to itself. It has to have somebody that would do an interpretation if there's some problem with the language being interpreted, so that the interpreter can disinterested be there to guide in the disturbance that's being created on different levels in the federal system. It doesn't take it's like what Ayn Rand said. It doesn't take a lot to run a government. It does not take it doesn't take they're now collecting $629 billion a month in taxes. Now multiply that by 12 months and $629 billion of taxes a month, and that comes out to what? That's about $7 trillion a year. 6 times 12, that's really is more like it's $8 trillion a year. There's no reason in the world our government should be in $36 trillion admitted to debt this country has, based on it taking in that kind of revenue, but it is, and that's what they admit to. I'm telling you that debt is in fact very much under reported because it doesn't take in the funding liabilities. And when you add in the interest rate, which has taken on a life of its own, I said in my post today, nobody's going to come behind it and say anything. I wrote in my article today about that debt. I took the conversation out of what Mark Levine talked about in his program last night, and he opened up that door. And I do understand that I think he did a pretty good job on it, but he didn't tell half the story about about that, quite frankly. But he did open the door up to the conversation because he understands that whatever he puts the numbers at is still it's a danger and a threat to the national stability of this country down the road. We're going to meet. We're going to um, reap the whirlwind by what we didn't pay for. You know, I say you get all you pay for. We're going to get what we didn't pay for because all that indebtedness we pile onto the future, that's going to come back to hunt this country at some point, and it's going to happen sooner than later because we're shortening that future by adding to it by overwhelming the future debt. Those debts are going to come due very, very, very early, and we're going to see a collapse here down the line. Read the article that I wrote today and see, and you scholars read it, and you tell me where I made an error. I'm looking forward to that conversation real soon, because so far they don't call me and tell me those things. Okay, let me say a few things. I can't get off the air without saying a few things about Article 2. I have to tell you about Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. You have to read the language very carefully here because the language in the first part of that segment of that section of the Constitution is talking about advice and consent. But in the first part of it, it was saying when it's talking about treaties, it says uh, the president shall have the power, shall listen carefully, shall have the power to make treaties with the advice and consent of the Senate, provided that 2/3 of the senators will concur. Now, you scholars, do you understand that language? With the consent, with the advice and consent of the Senate, provided that 2/3 of its members concur. And I was saying last week, touched on it at least, is that if the language says provided that and 2/3 have to concur with it, it means the other part of it is passive while this part of the language is in fact active. Didn't that mean that? The reason I raise this point here is because you have to be stupid to claim that you got a separation of powers, which you cannot deny because Articles 1, 2, and 3 do that. You have to be stupid to claim then that the separation of powers has stopped being separated if the president has to appoint his cabinet and get the Senate to approve the members of his cabinet to go into his administration in the executive branch of government. To have individual senators saying no to the president, who is the total person over the executive branch of government. If that's your view of the Constitution of the United States, I don't even want to talk to you. In fact, that's an argument they're making in the Andrew Johnson case. When he impeached Andrew Johnson, the 17th president of the United States. Because Johnson fired Edwin Stanton. You know, Edwin Stanton had had barricaded himself in his office. You know, put things up to the door so he couldn't get in and barricaded himself in there. He was not going to leave. And Johnson was saying that, you know, he was like Donald Trump, you're fired. And the Senate came to it came up against Andrew Johnson. and impeached him for that, saying that if they had to okay his being allowed into the office, that is, say they had to give advice and consent that he could serve as the president's secretary of war, that if they gave their consent him to be in that administration at that level, then to fire him, they also had to concur in the dismissal of Edwin Stanton. And it makes sense if that first part is true, then the second part is true also. You can't say that you have to have the senators approve the president's appointments and then say that they cannot fire, they can fire the appointee without the approval. If they have to approve it, put him in there. That's a contradiction right there. It doesn't make any sense. That's what people are claiming. What I'm saying to you is that we get to stop lying about what the Constitution calls for. Because that's not what the Constitution calls for. Where they got the president appoints his cabinet, now they have to go over here and beg the senators to allow them to take the president up on the appointment of his own cabinet. That's what they're doing right now, with them saying no to trying to say they already have said no and made Matt Walsh, Matt what's his name from Georgia? No, not Georgia, Florida, stepped down. He's going to be the secretary. He's going to be the Pam Bundy is now taking over the role they had for him, and they're now going after Hegseth and saying the president has to get the approval to appoint him in his role. He's going to be made the president's uh, head of the Pentagon, and they want him now. They're telling him that they may not approve Hegseth because there are some people who don't like him, and they can say no to the president, and that's how they're interpreting the appointment clause in Article 2. I'm gonna tell you something. You have to be bat so and so crazy to read that into Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. I'm telling you that they can't. That is not what that language requires. If they understood it, they'd understand that the language is passive and active in the very first part of that. But I'm the only one in the country saying that. You know why? Because I'm the only one that understands it. And I will stand down any of these scholars in this country that say otherwise, and they're not going to say anything because they're not qualified. I'm telling you the truth. And because I didn't come out of the Ivy League school like the ones that the government pulls from, they think you say Eastern, you're not saying that much. I'm saying more than they're saying about it. And they're not saying anything. And I dare them to say a peek on this program about it. That's not just the ones whose names I've called out. That's all of them. They're not qualified. They have nothing to say on this matter. And I dare them to come in here and say anything. And they can call in and say it. Let them say what they have to say. That would be a real interesting conversation. I invite that conversation. I'm telling you this. I'm the only one in the country saying it. In that part of the language, when they say that the president has the power with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided that the first part of that is passive, but the provided that is an active part, provided that 2/3 of the senators will concur. But what about the rest of it? What if they had not said provided that? What's the provided therefore? Is provided is there because the provided that 2/3 agree. That's the active part of the power. The passive part of the power is the advice and consent is already given. That's why it's passive. The president has a power that's already given to the president. You see it in terms of. Let me read. Let's see here. Um, Maybe I can read this to you. Listen to this right here very carefully. No scholar saying this. Where it says that uh, where it says the president may. Listen to this right here. Let me see if I can find this right here because I don't have my glasses, but let's see if I can find where it says uh, where he may request of his departments in writing that they will give something in writing to the president. Let me read it so I'll be able to hit it by just reading that whole passage. The president be shall be now commander in chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. He may, now listen to this right here, he may require the opinions in writing of the principal officers to each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of that respective office. So if the president wants to inquire about that domain where that person appointed is, he may, listen to this carefully, he may ask of them to put in writing any questions that he has, to answer him. He may do that. Now, why are these words like may and shall in there? Because the President of the United States and the other office holders in the government of the United States must have the permission, unlike you and I, they must have permission to act. And when they say shall do this, the president shall have the power with the advice and consent, and don't put provided that in that other part of the language, is because the president has power, because the power is already given to him because of the office that the president is in fact in. The power doesn't come with the individual, it comes with the office. And when they tell you that the president cannot be charged, I'm telling you that they cannot charge the president for doing anything when he's in the office. They talk about the president cannot be charged for official acts that he's doing while he is in office. Let me tell you something. The president can be charged for anything he does in office, whether it's official or not official, but you must go through a procedure in order to do it. Because it also says here, and let me see if I can find this. Let me read this to you right here. If you understand this language here, you understand this. It says this right here. And he shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Except in cases of impeachment. And that means that if you want to charge, let's say I want to see him charged. I definitely want to see Merrick Garland charged. I want to see Mayorkas charged. These persons need to be charged and brought into a court of law for what they did in their capacities as the Department of the DOJ and Homeland Security. That man has allowed this country to be invaded. Mayorkas. That man needs to be put in prison. But you see, what's going to happen is they're going to give a blanket pardon of these persons. They're right now getting ready to blanket a pardon. They better for the January 6th committee, because all of them should be going to jail. And the only thing the pardons will not touch and the priests won't touch will be if, in fact, these persons have been impeached, and then that removes that security from around them. The pardon does not touch them if the impeachment has occurred, because impeachment is a duty that is given in the Constitution to the legislative branch of government. I'm saying that these branches of government are there to not be invaded without going through a procedure and the protocol they put in place for that. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that to understand the Constitution of the United States is to not have to give any opinions about what the language says, because it's very clear. The do's and don'ts are very clearly written if you can read and understand what it was requiring and not requiring. But they don't understand that, and I dare them to come here and say that what I'm saying about it is wrong. The passive language and the active language in that particular part of the document is the advice and the consent given to the president have power to act is already there. But in the treaty, provided 2/3 of the members will concur with it. There's no provided that in other parts of that language, and therefore the power is already given to the president because of the inherent powers of the federal system given to the two levels of power in the federal and state government. That's as true as rain, and there's no scholar going to say anything behind it without a fight. They're not going to call and say anything because they're not capable of challenging that. I'm the only one saying it. Take it or let it alone. Okay, until next week. First of all, have a nice Christmas and a wonderful New Year, and we will see you on the other side of all of that, and be back here again next week. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.